Okay, fund seekers, do we have a treat in store for you today? Yeah, well, we are going to slog through mutual fund fees. And yes, it is a bit of a slog because the mutual fund industry is required by law, according to the Investment Company Act of 1940, to tell you how they are charging you. But of course, they do their best to make sure you don't understand. You are going to understand because remember, dear students, you are now the investment gurus for your family and friends and coworkers. And so you can't let them down. You have to learn this. So get out your thinking hats and pen and paper and make some notes and study. Let's start on slide 21. Annual operating expenses. Every mutual fund has annual operating expenses. Well, every investment has annual operating expenses. But are the banks and the life insurance companies required to show you their annual operating expenses? No. But the mutual fund companies, thanks to the Investment Company Act of 1940, are in the prospectus, which nobody reads. But anyway, let's start on slide 21. By far, normally the largest expense is the management fee. This is charged yearly based on a percentage of the fund's asset value, paid to the portfolio managers and analysts who make the investment decisions. Folks, if they're doing it right, it is not cheap. It is not inexpensive. If you're doing research, fundamental research, and we'll come back to what fundamental research is later on, then you're going out and knocking on the doors of the companies that you plan or you think you might invest in, your prospective investments, and you're going to their customers and their competitors and their bankers and their suppliers. And remember, these companies are global now, so you have to have people all over the world who speak many different languages. It's not a trivial task. So it often does cost much, especially global and international funds. The 12B1 fees are the annual fees used to defray advertising, servicing, and distribution costs of the fund. What? In other words, the mutual fund is required to tell you how much they're charging you in terms of advertising. Does Coca-Cola or McDonald's, do they tell you how much they're charging you? Because remember, you're paying for all that advertising, folks. It doesn't come free. You pay for it when you buy their products. No, they're not required, and they're not going to do it. But the mutual fund companies have to do it. And then the third one, which is usually fairly trivial, is the accounting and other expenses. Keeping the website going, and the rent, and the lights, the utilities, and the janitors, and the like, all the other expenses that go into running a company. There's a fourth annual operating expense, but that's only for people who have retirement accounts. Because when you have a retirement account, a Roth IRA, a 401k, there is an intermediary, a trustee who actually holds on to your money. Now, don't worry, they're not going to run away with it. But they are charged by the IRS to make sure that you don't do anything that you're not supposed to do, and the company does everything they're supposed to do, and that typically costs $10. I've seen it as high as $35 a year, but usually it's about $10 a year. Some companies are old school; they let you pay for it with a check outside of the retirement plan, but most just roll it into the account. You see a $10 charge every year or whatever. Now, on slide 22, there are other costs involved, and those are the trading costs, but they're not disclosed in the annual prospectus. Remember, whenever you buy and sell a stock or a bond, there are trading costs. Now, when you're buying 100,000 shares, the trading costs are a very, very small percentage of your cost of the shares, but still they're there. So if they're not disclosed in the annual prospectus, how does an investor know how much the trading costs are? Well, you can literally ask the mutual fund, or simply look at the annual turnover. That's a much easier way to determine if your fund has high trading costs. The annual turnover is a measure of how much trading a mutual fund does. It's measured in a percentage of the amount a portfolio turns over each year. So, for example, if you had 100% turnover, that means within 1 year the company would have bought and sold all the investments that are in the mutual fund. 50% turnover would take 2 years. 25% would take 4 years. Does that make sense? It's the inverse. And the higher the turnover, of course, the higher the trading costs. So some of these mutual funds have huge turnovers, 200%, and you think, wait a minute, that means you're holding on to an investment for 6 months? An average of 6 months? That to me is not investing. But other people might say, no, that's what I want. I want them to buy and sell and buy and sell and buy and sell. I like to look for mutual funds, especially stock mutual funds, that have a turnover rate of about 25%, 20%, because that means they're holding things for 4 or 5 years. And there's a reason for that, which we'll come back to later. Later, when we get into the heart of the course, we'll see why 3, 4, 5 years is about as far out as you can possibly want to even estimate. Now, there is a caveat. Remember our money market mutual funds that we discussed in Chapter 1? We're going to review them later on in this chapter. Those hold securities that mature in 60 days or 90 days. Yes, they mature very quickly. So money market mutual funds are going to have very high turnovers. But that's just because the securities that they hold mature very quickly. So that's a caveat. Don't look at a money market mutual fund with a turnover of 300% and say, oh, these guys are terrible. No, that's just because whatever they hold is good for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. Now, on slide 23, we're going to discuss the load, the sales charge versus no-load funds. Load funds, which were the first funds, the very first funds all had a sales charge associated with them, charge a commission when the shares are bought, anywhere from 3 to 5%. Some of them were higher. This amount is used to compensate the financial representative along with the fund's distributor. Well, as competition heated up, some mutual funds came out and said, look, bypass the middleman. Go right to us. We have no load funds. We do not charge a commission. And they were traditionally sold directly to shareholders. The brokers didn't like this, so they wanted to get in on the act, and we'll see what happened. But the endless debate is, should you purchase a load fund or a no-load fund? And all other things being equal, right, if you're not utilizing the help of a professional, then yes, why should you buy a load fund? However, that doesn't mean you're going to wind up spending fewer dollars in costs over time, because some load funds, even though you pay a sales commission, have lower annual operating expenses than many no-load funds. So over time, you're going to wind up actually spending more with a no-load fund versus a load fund. And again, you have to compare the funds you're looking at. So don't categorically throw away no load funds, especially if you want the services of a broker. But as we'll see, the load funds have come out of favor, and so the brokers have figured out ways to charge you by not charging you a load, but winding up charging you even more over time, which is not what the whole idea behind no load funds was, but that's what's happened. So stick with us as we start to navigate the various types of load and no load funds. Slide 24. Load funds started out as all Class A. Some companies call them Class 1, but most people call them Class A. Front-end load. This is the way all mutual funds sold for a few decades. The commission is paid when the shares are purchased, and they normally have lower annual operating expenses. So you pay the upfront commission to the mutual fund. They share it with the brokerage firm that represented them, and they get some of it themselves, the distributor of the mutual fund. The back-end load came about because people didn't want to pay that upfront fee, so they created the Class B shares, and the commission is paid when the shares are redeemed. Well, you might say, well, big deal, Mr. Broker. What good is that? Whether you charge me up front or charge me in the back. No, relax, sit down. We have what's called a contingent deferred sales charge. I love that name, contingent deferred sales charge. Say contingent. It feels good when you say it. You can feel it down in your throat. Yeah. And they start at, say, 5%. In the first year, and then go to 4, 3, 2, 1, until finally the contingent deferred sales charge disappears. So, yeah, I'm in it for the long term, so I don't think I'm going to wind up paying that contingent deferred sales charge. So, okay, no problem. Where do they get you? Normally, the back-end loads pay higher annual operating expenses until the contingent deferred sales charge disappears, or maybe a year or two after that. And then they revert, they become the Class A shares, meaning that they get the lower annual operating expenses. I know, you're confused already, aren't you? I understand. It's tricky, but just write down Class A, upfront fee, Class B, back-end fee, but that fee goes down over time until finally it becomes zero, but the Class B shares have higher annual operating expenses and eventually become Class A shares. So both of these shares got a little bit of a bad rep. And what did the brokerage firms do? They came up with Class C shares. They were wait a minute. They're load funds? What are they, Piano? Well, the brokers used to call these broker no-load funds because there was no upfront fee. There might have been a back-end fee if you took the money out within a year, which you're not going to do. You want to leave it in there for the long term. However, the Class C shares have higher annual operating expenses in perpetuity. You like that word? I like that word. In perpetuity. It kind of means forever, or for a long time, 10 years or whatever, courtesy of those 12B1 fees. Hence, the Class C shares, which don't have an upfront fee, don't have a back-end fee, can wind up costing you more than the Class A or B shares over time. But the Securities and Exchange Commission came around and said, wait a minute. You didn't really get rid of the load, brokerage firms. All you did was tack it on to the shares over 10 years or over the lifetime of the fund. You hid the upfront fee, the back-end fee, in the 12B1 fees. And so now the SEC says you cannot call a mutual fund a no-load fund if the 12B1 fee is greater than 0.25%. Now you're thoroughly confused, aren't you? It's confusing. So Class C shares are not allowed to be called no-load funds, even though some people in the industry, I should change that many to some, still do. They still consider them no-load because there's not an upfront fee, there's not a back-end fee. What they're doing is charging you over time. Now let's take a look at no-load funds that were meant to be no-load funds. And the first class are the Class F, or Class I, or Class FI. These were designed with brokers in mind. They are now sometimes called advisor funds or advisor no-load funds. They do not charge an upfront fee. They do not charge a back-end fee. What happens is they are placed in what's called a wrap account, or a management account, or a wealth management account. We're not your brokers. Oh, no. We're your wealth managers. We are on your side. We want you to be wealthy, so we're going to charge you a 1% or maybe a 2% fee forever. Yes, folks, I'm not a big fan of these because as an investor, you're going to wind up spending a whole lot more over time via the wrap account fees, the wealth management fees. Surprise! These are the most popular now with professional money managers, with brokerage firms and the like. Because, we know that those upfront fees are just something horrible. But you wind up paying more with the wealth management fee. And if you're a broker, oh boy, that's what you'd love to be able to do. But yours truly has no clients who do this, because I don't think it's in the best interest of the clients. Now, I'm in the minority here, folks. I'll tell you. I'll never forget sitting in that seminar, and we were discussing these, and I was saying that I didn't think that these were in the best interest of the clients. They paid the upfront fee, and then they got lower annual operating expenses forever. And the guy says, what are you talking about? They'll love you. You send them a bottle of wine on their birthday, take them golfing, send them something for Christmas. Hey, they'll love you. And I thought, but that's not the issue that we're discussing, whether or not they love you or not. Yeah. Anyway, finally we get to the true no-load funds. Now, that's not a legal term. There's no legal term associated with true. That's just what the financial media calls them. These are mutual funds that typically deal directly with the public. They may not have a 12B1 fee greater than 0.25%. Yes, I understand that. You don't, but you need to learn it because it's tricky. These are the darlings of the popular media. Bypass the middleman. Who needs a financial advisor? Just buy my book and sign up for my seminar. And as we've already mentioned, that does not mean the overall fees are low. Over time, a no-load fee can wind up costing you more than a no-load fund, can wind up costing you more than a load fund because of the annual operating expenses, the annual operating fees. You have to look at it over the long term, in my humble opinion. But again, if you go to a broker, they're probably going to show you a wrap account, a wealth management account, and charge you 1 or maybe even 2%. I shouldn't complain. I should just say, yeah, that's what I'm doing too. Slide number 27. Now let's look at some real funds. These are real funds, folks, and this is a very good fund. It's called the AB Large Cap Growth Fund. It used to be called the Alliance Large Cap Growth Fund, but Alliance merged with Bernstein, and instead of calling it Alliance Bernstein, they changed the name to AB. And, of course, everybody loves AB, ABS, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, they have the Class A shares, the B shares, the C shares, and then they have what's called their advisor class, which they used to call Class F for financial advisor, but now they call the advisor class. The Class A shares have a front-end fee of 4.25%. So you put in $100, you pay $4.25. You put in $1,000, you pay $42.50. You pay $10,000, and then you pay $425. You pay $100,000. No, it doesn't work that way. Once you hit a sales charge breakpoint, which is typically $25,000 or $50,000, whether you purchase those shares, invest it, or your account grows to that amount, you no longer pay the maximum sales charge. Notice it says maximum sales charge. The sales charge then starts to be reduced as the amount of money you invest in the fund or your investment account grows. And until eventually, typically when you have invested $1 million or your account becomes $1 million, you no longer pay any sales charge. You think they're after the wealthy people, don't you? Exactly. They want wealthy people. If you're a broker, you don't want somebody paying $50, $100 a month into a mutual fund. You want them to come up with $500,000 or $1 million. I'm very happy to have clients putting $50, $100 a month because they're the people who need to. The people who have $1 million to invest, they don't need my help. They don't need anybody's help. They're doing fine. Now, what are the management fees? Well, in this fund, they are charging you 0.59%. What does that mean? That means for every $100, that you have in the account, they charge 59 cents. In perpetuity. There's that word again. You can use it to spit on your friends. So 59 cents for every $100. Yeah, and that's goes to the people in the top hats who have to go knock on the doors and decide whether or not this company is worthwhile to invest in, and talk to their competitors and talk to their suppliers and their customers and their bankers and the like. The 12B1 fees are 25 cents for every $100, 0.25%. And again, those are the fees that go to distributing and servicing and advertising the account, the 12B1 fees. What a great name, 12B1, right? And then other expenses, the website, the rent for the buildings, the janitors, and all the other stuff, the lights are 16 cents. So you wind up paying 1%, $1, for every $100 you have in the account in perpetuity. Now, does that sound like a lot of money? Well, historically, it's not. Historically, it's not a whole lot of money. It's a whole lot less than the banks or the life insurance companies charge you. But are they required to tell you how much they're charging you? Actually, no, so they don't. But because of the Investment Company Act of 1940, the mutual fund companies must show you what they're charging you in the prospectus, which nobody reads. Now, the next the next group are the Class B shares. You see, you say to your broker, prospective broker, Ms. Broker, Mr. Broker, I don't want to pay that upfront fee. And what do they say? No problem. Sit down, booby. We, for you, have the Class B shares. There's no upfront fee. But there is a maximum deferred sales charge of 4%. What does that mean? Well, that's the back-end charge. Well, big deal. You charge me in the beginning or charge me at the end. What's the difference? Relax, dear Mr. and Mrs. John Q. investing public. It's a contingent deferred sales charge, which means it starts out at 4% in the first year, and then goes down to 3%, 2%, 1%, and after 4 years, you don't pay any back-end charge. And you're in it for the long term, right? Mutual funds are long-term investments, right, Mr. and Mrs. John Q. investing public? And you nod your heads and say, oh, yes, of course. So you will not pay any deferred sales charge. Okay, cool. The management fees are 59 cents, just like the Class A shares. But what happened? What happened to the 12B1 fees? You see what they did? They increased the 12B1 fees to 1%. So essentially they're amortizing the cost of the commission. And I forget, is it 6 years for Alliance? I forget. I should go back and look that up. I think it's 6 years for Alliance. And after 6 years, they become A shares. So after 6 years, this 1% goes down to 25 cents. That's how it works. The other expenses are a little higher at 21 cents. So you wind up paying $1.80 for every $100 you have in the account. Now, we're getting closer, but not there yet, to how much the insurance companies and the banks charge, which is 3% and 4% or sometimes more. Yeah, okay. So you go to your broker and say, Ms. Broker, I don't want the upfront fee. I don't want the back-end fee. Do you have anything else that doesn't have an upfront fee or a back-end fee? And they say, no problem. You get the picture, right? There's never any problem. Sit down. For you, we have the Class C shares. No upfront fee. There's a 1% fee if you take the money out within a year, but this is a long-term investment. You're not going to do that, and you really shouldn't, folks. You choose a mutual fund, you stick with them. The 59 cents is the same as the A and the B shares, but there's that 12B1 fee of $1, and I forget Alliance, but I think it stays there for 10 years, right? Or is it 8 years? It's either 10 or 8. And then they become the advisor class. Other expenses, 17 cents, so $1.76. Very similar to the Class B shares. So you wind up paying that commission a little bit every year over time. And you wind up, as we'll see, spending more. Now, the advisor class look really cool. I mean, doesn't this look cool? No upfront fee, no back-end fee, 59 cents. Well, it's the same as the others, but 0% distribution and or service fees. 16 cents, so 75. That's what I want. I want those. That's what I want, Ms. Broker. No upfront fee, no back-end fee, low annual operating expenses. And the broker says, oh, by the way, we charge an extra 1 or 2%. What was that, Ms. Broker? We charge an extra 1, maybe even 2% every year for as long as you own the funds. Because we're your wealth managers. And we want you to bend over. We want you to prosper. Who would do this to their clients? Virtually everyone is doing this now, folks. And the government is sort of sponsoring it. They're sort of encouraging it with the new Department of Labor rules, which are been postponed, and maybe who knows how long they're going to be postponed. But it's not good, in my humble opinion. But who am I? I'm just a part-time broker, and I teach this stuff, and so I get a great salary. So shut up, Piano. You're one of those liberal elite college professors. Yeah. Okay. Well, you got to be careful, folks, because I had a client who was shown through her church, folks. This is where, if anybody comes to you from the church, this is not that of God, folks. This is Caesar. Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar. This stuff is Caesar, folks. And they offered to deal with her money for a 2% annual fee. And I told her what was going on, and she went back to them and explained to them that I had explained to them what was going on, and they immediately lowered it to 1%. Without asking any questions. Oh, we'll only charge you 1%. They were still making out like bandits. But hey, it's church. What can you do? How do you compete with Jesus? Slide 28. Here's another mutual fund that has incidentally gotten rid of their Class B shares. The Class B shares, by the way, are not as popular, and they're going by the wayside. This is called the New Economy Fund. What a great name, right? New Economy Fund. And it's actually done pretty well. But they have, look at their A shares, 5.75%. So their maximum sales charge up to $25,000 is higher than the AB large cap fund that we saw in the previous slide. But look at their management fees and their 12B1 fees. Their annual operating expenses are less at only 82 cents a year for every $100 as opposed to $1. Yeah, exactly. So which one do you think is going to be better over the long term? It's a bit of a wash. They charge you an extra 1.5%, but they charge you less, 0.18% every year. So if you hold on to it a long time, eventually these folks will charge you less than the others, but not that much less. As I said, they got rid of their B shares, and their Class C shares are still around. No upfront fee, a 1% fee if you take the money out within a year, which you really shouldn't do, folks. Don't do that. That's not the way to invest in mutual funds. In my humble opinion, it's your money. You do whatever you want with it. Again, there's the 12B1 fees, which in Americans' new economy fund, it's 10 years. They stay 10 years in the Class C shares, and then they become the F shares. This 1% goes away. So 23 cents is the other expense, so $1.62, so twice as much as the A shares. And which one do you think is going to cost you more over time? Right, the C shares, the B shares. They're going to wind up costing you more over time. So now they have, I think, F1, F2, and F3. But let's take a look at their F2. No upfront fee, no back-end fee, 39 cents. Well, that's the same for all the share classes. That's paid to the managers, and they do the same job no matter what share class they are. No 12B1 fee, 19 cents, so 58 cents. That's the lowest we've seen of any of the mutual funds, right? Don't forget to tack the 1 or 2% every year that is paid directly to the brokerage firm. Yes. Actually, I have seen one broker charge less than 1%, but only one. Right. Okay, let's continue. Now, here's another fund, a very infamous fund, used to be famous, called the Legg Mason Value Trust. Well, you know what? They changed the name to the Clearbridge Value Trust. Why did they do that? And they didn't used to have the A shares. They used to have what were called primary class shares, which they changed to C shares. So they have the A shares, which have 5.75%, like the new economy fund that we just saw. 68 cents management fees, 25 cents, 14 cents, so $1.07 for every $100. They don't have the BShares, but they did have the CShares. They still have the CShares. Those were the primary class. 68 cents for the management fee. Well, that's the same no matter what share class you get. And 95 cents for the distribution and or service fees. And after the SEC said you can't call these no-load funds anymore because your 12B1 fee is greater than 25 cents, I'm cynical enough to say, look, all we really have to do is pick this up and move 75 cents of it up to here, and we're no longer, we can now still call ourselves no-load funds. I guess if any mutual fund did that, the Securities and Exchange Commission would come back and say, now guys, that's not what we had in mind. So they now call them load funds, the Class C load funds, where the load is distributed over 10 years. I'm pretty sure 10 years for Lake Basin. The FI shares have no upfront fee, no back-end fee, lower annual operating expenses. Actually, they're a little bit more than the Class A shares. That's atypical. Because their other expenses are a little higher. So $1.15, but don't forget to tack on the extra $1, $2, 1 or 2% for every $100 for your broker who sends you a bottle of wine on your birthday and takes you out golfing, and so you'll love him or her. Now the institutional class shares look great, right? 68 cents and 12, so 80 cents. It's not as low as the previous one, the American funds, but it's still pretty low, right? How do we get those? How do we get the institutional funds? I guess we have to be institutionalized, right? And we'll come back to that later. Now, slide number 20. We're ready for something completely different. This is the Vanguard 500 Index Fund. This is a fund that does no research, and we will discuss index funds later on in detail. They are now the perfect investment. Be careful when anybody tells you about a perfect investment. No investment is perfect. Every investment has advantages. Every investment has disadvantages. So keep your eyes open. The term for this is passive management. Now, what are we talking about, folks? These people do no research. Remember the people in the top hats that go and knock on the doors all around the world? They don't do that. All they do is look at a list of stocks, a list of 500 companies, the Standard & Poor's 500. And if it's on the list, they buy the stock. And if it's not on the list, they don't buy the stock. You or I could run this fund, and we don't need a top hat. And we don't need to go to the Wharton School of Business or Harvard or Chicago or Stanford, University of Chicago, University of Stanford, to get a $500,000 a year job to be a mutual fund manager. No, we just look at a list and buy it if it's there, and if it's not there, don't buy it. And hence, what do you think the fees are going to be? Right, the fees are going to be a whole lot less. No upfront fee, no back-end fee, 12 cents for management fees. There's only a $20 annual fee for 12B1 fees if your account is less than $10,000. But you can get that waived if you sign up for electronic delivery. And then there's a 2 cents, 0.02%, 2 cent fee for other expenses. So this company is charging you 14 cents for every $100 in your account. Yes, well they better. They ain't doing anything, folks. They're not doing any research, they're not doing any decision making, so they better not charge you a whole lot. And this fund has made Vanguard famous. So much so that their main competitor, Fidelity, decided if you can't beat them, join them. Fidelity 500 Index Fund. It used to be called the Spartan Index Fund. They got rid of that name. I don't think people understood what they meant. They had something to do with Greeks or Trojans. No, the Spartans were sparse, right? They were abstemious. You like that word, abstemious? It means cheap. So Vanguard pioneered low-fee mutual funds and was able to overtake Fidelity as the #1 mutual fund company. And Fidelity said, well, if you can't beat them, join them. They eliminated all sales loads, created their own index funds, and lowered their fees below Vanguard. So their management fees are 1.5 cents. Other expenses, 7.5 cents. Again, if your account is less than $2,000, they charge you $12 a year, unless you sign up for automatic purchases. And so that's 9 cents. How low can you go? It's like limbo, right? Because they want to compete with Vanguard. So what do you think about index funds, huh? We'll come back to them later. We'll come back to index funds later. Slide 32. Every prospectus shows you how much you would be charged over 1, 3, 5, and 10 years. So we're going to assume that we don't take the money out. We're just going to leave it in for 10 years. And as it turns out, this is the AB large cap fund, the first fund we looked at. The Class A shares wind up costing us more over 1 year. They use a hypothetical $10,000 investment, as if everybody has $10,000 laying around the house, and a 5% return. And we're going to hope to do better than 5%. But the Class A shares wind up costing us more over 1 year. But watch what happens over 3 and 5 years. The Class B and the Class C shares are catching up, right? And then after 10 years, who cost us the most? Right. The Class B and the C shares wind up costing us more than the Class A shares. Now, the advisor shares look like the best deal, right? Wrong. If you added the typical 1 to 2% fee every year, that easily adds an extra $1,300, $2,600 to the total cost. So over the long term, which is the best deal for you, the investor? The A shares. This assumes that you want to have a broker to assist you in choosing your mutual funds, right? And the broker's job is to watch over the funds and make sure that that things don't change and the world doesn't end for that mutual fund company. And what I would suggest is you find a broker that invests in the same funds that they're recommending. Okay? Now, I'm not tooting my own horn here, but that's what I do, and that's what the best brokers that I've met are the ones that invest in the same companies that they recommend to their clients. That way, you have the added consolation that if your funds don't do well, at least your brokers didn't do well. And I'll relate to you a little story that my wife had when she was working at a social service agency which had a 403B, and the insurance company, a lot of insurance companies sponsor these things, folks. Don't ever trust an insurance company with your investments. Remember, I'm an insurance broker, an insurance agent too, so we'll say true things about everybody. We'll insult everybody by the end of the semester, don't worry. And they were showing these funds which were pretty bad, with high fees. And she goes up to the woman in the 3-piece suit, the broker, and says, well, my husband has American funds, and that's what he has me in my Roth IRA. And she said, oh, yeah, I love American funds. That's what I invest in. And my wife said, well, why aren't we using American funds? She said, oh, well, these are your funds. She didn't answer why. She just said, these are your funds. Why? Because the insurance company will often throw in, well, not often, they usually always throw in funds that are much higher fees so that they get so they make more money. Their idea is to maximize the fees. And I think that's the worst way to treat a client, because eventually some client's going to get hip to what's going on and then tell everybody, and then you just better walk away clean, Jack, because your credibility has now been destroyed. Let's take a look at the Legg Mason Value Trust. Well, again, the same kind of situation happens. Over the long term, the A shares wind up being cheaper than the C shares. And remember, they don't have the B shares, and the B shares are going away. Again, the financial intermediary, the financial investment advisor class, looks like a better deal, but you have to tack on the 1 or 2% that the advisor is going to take. An institutional class looks even better. How do you get them? Well, for starters, are you a large pension fund, a university endowment, a tax-exempt charity? And oh, by the way, do you have at least $1 million to invest with us? Get out of here. Yeah, so you see it's stacked against the little guy. They want big dogs running with the crowd. Now, let's take a look at something completely different. And this is the Vanguard 500 Index Fund, which we saw had the lowest fees. And it turns out that the fees for passively managed index funds will almost always be less than actively managed funds. Now, why do I say almost always? Because there's a caveat here. Some 401k plans, 403b plans, employer-sponsored plans, especially those run by insurance companies. Go ahead, guys. Sue me. Let's go to Discovery. I'd be happy to show you Southwestern's 403b. Why would they do this? Why would they sneak in high-fee index funds? Because they can. Who would do that to their employees? Southwestern College did. And they had no idea they were doing it. I would go up to the HR people, human resource people, and say, do you understand that these things are really rotten? Do you understand what's going on? And they just look at me and go, no, I don't. Finally, one of the folks up there took my class. And she came to me and said, boy, we're really getting screwed, aren't we? I said, yes, yes, that's what I've been saying. Well, they changed that, folks, a year and a half ago, or 2 years ago, maybe it was just last year. I don't remember. They switched. No, it was about 2 years ago, not quite. They switched to a different provider, and now the index funds have lower fees. They're not as low as Vanguard, and I don't understand why they don't go straight to Vanguard if that's what people want, the lowest fees, or Fidelity or some other company that charges very, very low fees, but that's what they do. Oh, by the way, look at this. Vanguard, again, because they're competing with everybody else, has another class called the Admiral class. Now, they used to be available only with a minimum of $100,000, but now they've changed that to $10,000. So you can get the class Admiral class with as little as $10,000. And those fees are even lower. Look at that. $51 over 10 years. And do you remember the exchange-traded funds we discussed in the previous presentation? They often have fees lower than the index funds. But then you have to deal with the brokerage firm, and some brokerage firms will charge you a commission. Others will want you to put it in their wrap account, which means that they're charging you 1 or 2%. So you have to be careful. You have to understand this. And yes, dear students, it is very confusing. That's why we're explaining it to you. So you will be the investment guru, the financial guru for your friends and family and coworkers, and you will be so awesome. I know you will. And you're going to be in that meeting where the broker in that three-piece suit is explaining why they're selling you these horrible funds, and they won't, of course, say that, and you'll look up and say, well, how come your index fund is charging us 80 cents for every $100 as opposed to Vanguard, which only charges 14 cents for every $100? And then that person will start going, and you're going to look like a genius, and all of your friends and coworkers are going to say, you were so awesome, where did you learn that? And you're going to tell them, you know what you're going to tell them, right? BUS123, Introduction to Investments at Southwestern College. Hey, I wash your back, you wash my back. Okay, so now, let's go to slide 35. The breakpoint sales reductions, huh? Well, remember we said that sales charge was the maximum sales charge. For the New Economy Fund and for the Legg Mason Value Trust, now called the Clear Bridge Value Trust, it was 5.75%, which by today's standards is high, but 50 years ago that was nothing. And we're charged that on the first $25,000 that either we invest, we purchase, or accumulates, or it goes up in our account. Once it hits $25,000, it goes down to 5%, $50,000, 4.5%, right, $100,000, 3.5%, 2.5%, till finally $1 million, you don't pay any sales charge. You see, brokers want high net worth individuals. They make it so much easier for them, they treat them so much better than they treat the little guy. Now, let's read together, because this is another example of brokers servicing their clients in not the best way, in my humble opinion, and also the Securities and Exchange Commission, which thwacked brokers who did this. Class A shares qualify for a sales reduction if you invest a larger amount or as your investment grows. Some brokers would conveniently fail to inform their clients of this feature. Instead, as the client approached the breakpoint, the broker would advise them to start another fund. Why would you do this? When I first heard this, I couldn't believe it. Who would do that to their client? It turns out a lot of brokers are doing it. And now if you do this, if you don't tell them, if you don't advise them about this, and instead go to another fund where they have to start all over again, you can lose your license and get fined and wind up having to reimburse the client, of course. So good. That's all I have to say, because I just couldn't believe it. It just wasn't in my consciousness. Of course you want your clients to have a better deal, right? Right? Mm-hmm. And now, finally, the contingent deferred sales charge that we discussed, the Class B shares, which, as we said, are kind of going away. This was the AB Large Cap Growth Fund. The first year, if you take your money out, they're going to charge you 4%. That's the back-end charge, the contingent deferred sales charge. 3% for the second year, 2, 1, until after 4 years, it is eliminated. Now, this kind of surrender charge schedule is what the life insurance companies call it. This kind of reduction over time is very typical with life insurance companies with their annuities. But they often start not at 4% or 6%, they start at 20 or 25%. Yes, annuities are poopy caca. Go ahead, life insurance companies, sue me. Remember, I'm a life insurance agent. Yeah, okay. So be careful. Keep your back to the wall and your head down low when you deal with life insurance companies. And when you deal with brokerage firms, too. Make sure you get a good referral. Don't worry. We'll insult everybody by the end of the semester. So now, I'm tired. Are you tired? Are you confused? Good. We've done our job. Well, not me. I haven't done my job. I haven't done my job. But the brokerage firm industry has done their job if you're thoroughly confused and never want to look at this again. But it's not that hard. Go through and categorize all 4 different types. There are actually a whole lot more. There are a whole lot more than these types, but these are the main 4 categories. And then there are all different variations on the theme. So make sure you understand these, because I'm going to ask you on the test. But more importantly, you're now the expert for your friends and family, and you can't let them down. So here you go. Slide number 37. And if you printed it out, you're going to have to watch this, because you won't be able to see the answers. But now that you know all about how you're being charged, which one of the 4 mutual funds would you choose? The AB Large Cap Growth Fund, the New Economy Fund, and of course we'll use the Class A shares because those will be the cheapest. The Legg Mason Value Trust, now called the ClearBridge Value Trust, and they didn't have the Class A shares 10 years ago, so those were the primary class. Or the abstemious, I love that word, abstemious, Vanguard Index 500. I'm going to give you $10,000 10 years ago. Ta-da! Fees are important, dear students, but they certainly do not tell the whole story. When comparing mutual funds, you must look at many attributes, not the least of which are the rates over time, preferably over longer periods of time. And I don't even like 10 years. I like 40, 50 years. I look at mutual funds that have done well over decades, 80 years. And they're the kind of mutual funds that I like. I'm a long-term kind of guy. And what we find is that if you have a actively managed fund that actually goes out and knocks on the doors, you can do a whole lot better than the index. Both these funds did pretty darn well. They beat the Index 500. The AB Large Cap Growth Fund beat it substantially. They wound up with 26,271. The New Economy Fund, 22,544. And remember, that's after you paid that 5.75% for the New Economy, 4.25% for the AB Large Cap Growth Fund. If you had more to invest, you actually would have paid fewer dollars in the upfront fee. So you would have done even better than 10.62 and 8.47%. Now, let's skip the Legg Mason Value Trust now and go down to the Standard & Poor's 500. How come the index fund did not do as well as the Standard & Poor's 500? Well, the reason is because the index fund has some fees. An index fund will never match the index, but it'll come pretty darn close. Right? The index fund will come pretty darn close, but there's a little bit of friction in there because they have to make some money or they can't stay in business. Now look at the Legg Mason Value Trust. Now the reason I include this, folks, is to show you what, I can show you good things that are happening, but bad things that are happening. What happened? This fund, for almost 2 decades, well, actually like 16, 17 years, was awesome. If you had come here 10 years ago, it would have been 34,000, not 14,000. It was run by a gentleman who we'll come back to later on by the name of Bill Wilson. Very sharp guy. Bill Wilson, is that right? Yeah, Bill Wilson. All of a sudden I'm thinking I got his name wrong. But for 15 years in a row, he beat the Standard & Poor's 500 index. I mean, think about that. That's like Tony Gwynn, who was the batting champion, 6 or 7 years? I mean, it's insane. Nobody's going to do that ever again. And then he lost his touch. I don't know what happened, but he started to lose, and lose big. Now, what was his strategy? In fact, people would ask me, why don't you invest with him? And I would say, look, I like Mr. Wilson, Bill Miller. I'm sorry, Bill Miller, not Bill Wilson. Bill Miller. I like Mr. Miller. I've listened to him talk. He's brilliant, but he's concentrated. He would only have about 40 funds in his mutual fund, which, it sounds like a lot, and it is for you and me, it's a lot. But for a mutual fund, no. You need 100, 200 funds, 200 stocks in your mutual fund to get really good diversification. So it worked great while his companies were doing well. But when his companies fell on bad times, it had the opposite effect. The dual-edged sword. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. And he just stunk up the place over a few years, throughout the Great Recession and afterwards, and finally he left in 2012 or 2014. He finally retired. So what's the takeaway? You need to do good research on your funds, choose funds that have done well over time, and be careful if it's too good to be true. And people will tell me that they just want to go with index funds. Fine, go with the index funds. But we're going to see that there are people who have beaten the indices over decades. That's not luck, folks. That's skill. And just because you or I can't hit a fastball at 95 miles an hour doesn't mean there aren't people who can hit the fastball at 95 miles an hour, or dunk a basketball, or sing a 4-hour opera. It's skill. It takes skill and practice, and some people do really, really well. Other people don't do very well. Cool? Okay, good. Let's now do some checking for comprehension. This is in the face-to-face class, and if you've printed these out, you already know the answers. But in the face-to-face class, we have these A, B, C, D cards that I've told you about, and we have people hold them up. These shares, on slide 38, do not have an upfront sales load. Instead, they assess a decreasing back-end load if you withdraw your money within 6 years. The annual operating expense is higher, courtesy of the 12B1 fees. Back-end load, Class B, right. Contingent deferred sales charge. And they normally revert to A shares, so you get the lower annual operating expenses after 6 or 8 years or so. Slide 39. These shares do not have an upfront fee and only a 1% back-end fee if you redeem them within 1 year. The advisor called them NoLoad, but you notice that the annual operating expense is higher than other share classes, again, courtesy of the ubiquitous, there's another good word, it means, all the time there, 12B1 fees, courtesy of the 12B1 fees. Right, no upfront fee, small back-end fee within 1 year, higher annual operating expenses, Class C shares. And then they sometimes revert to the Class A shares or the F shares after 10 years or whatever. And some don't. Some just keep charging you forever. And then finally, your advisor tells you that these shares have no sales fee and a very low annual operating expense. She mumbles something about wealth management. These are the A, B, C, or the F or I shares. They're the F or the I shares, right? The correct answer is D. She also did her best not to explain to you that her brokerage firm will charge you an extra 2% each year, but she'll send you a birthday card and take you to the steakhouse, and everything will be fine. Oh, by the way, as we've already mentioned, there are dozens of other share classes depending upon the mutual fund company, but don't worry. All of them are variations on the 4 main themes we learned today. So you learn these 4 themes, you will understand how mutual funds charge their customers. Okay? So go back and learn and do this again. Yeah, I know. It's confusing. It's frustrating. It's tedious. But you need to know it. You need to know it because I've said before and I'm going to say again, you have a great responsibility now, folks. You are the experts for your friends and family. You're the investment gurus for your coworkers. You can't let them down. Okay? Good. Because in our next presentation, it's going to get just as crazy. Our next presentation, we're going to do our best to wrap our arms around the mutual fund industry. And it's like trying to wrap your arms around an 800-pound marshmallow. But we will do it because this is an introduction to investments class, and you need to do it. All right? See you in our next presentation, folks. Don't give up. Never give up. We want you to be awesome, and you will be awesome. We're sure of it. We guarantee it.